We are delighted to have our guest, Ardi, back in Arizona. Ardi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Very nice. Can you tell us about something about you, what you do, what you like doing, some of your hobbies?
I like playing violin. I like playing sports, especially swimming and running. And yeah, I'm mostly involved with music and with sports outside of school.
Mhm. Oh, fantastic, fantastic. What type of music do you like? Do you play any instrument?
Yes, I play violin, I play guitar, and I play piano.
That's very nice. Well, today, Ardi, what is communication for you? What do you understand when we say communication, good communication? What is good communication for you? What is communication in general?
Communication is the transmittance of information from one person to another. It's the transmission and reception of something. For example, it can be words, it can be feelings, it can be ideas, and so on.
Well, you mentioned something very important: transmit feelings, ideas, instructions, commands. Um, what is really the purpose of communication? Now that you mentioned that we want to communicate our feelings, what is the purpose of communication? Why do we communicate?
We communicate as people because people are not self-sufficient. We need each other to function properly. And for example, when even when you're born, you're born communicating. You cry when you're in pain, you laugh when you're happy, and so on. It's just in our nature. It's not necessarily something that we learn to communicate. Obviously, we learn to communicate using words and using different languages, but communication is essential to being a human.
Very nice. I like your answer very much. Thanks. Do you think there is such thing as good communication, poor communication? Which are those concepts? What is effective communication?
Effective communication involves transmitting your message as clearly as possible with no ambiguity, and also receiving the message knowing exactly what it is that the other person is trying to demonstrate. For example, bad communication would involve misunderstanding or misinterpreting what the other person is trying to communicate, and that leads to a lot of um, discontinuity between what it is one person wants to say and what the other person understands that they want to say.
Okay. Which are in your mind are the benefits of having a good communication, effective communication, to be clear, to transmit your message, your ideas, your feelings, your intentions, your ambitions? What is the benefit of being clear or being able to convey a right, clear, and effective message? What are the benefits?
Well, the benefits of having your message be clear would be that your message will be understood and your message will probably be acted upon more efficiently. For example, if your message is that you want something to occur, it is much more likely that that thing will occur if you transmit your message properly. Whereas if you do not transmit your message in a way that is clear, then it is less likely that it will be received or acted upon.
Okay. There's been some cases throughout history where effective communication is not carried out, is not been successful. On the other hand, just the opposite. People communicate poorly or the message doesn't come as it should arrive at the destination. There is miscommunication. Which are the consequences of bad communication, of poor communication, ineffective communication? What can be the consequences of this miscommunication, Ardi?
Well, on a small scale, miscommunication can have negative effects in that they can often lead to disagreement or misconceptions about different people. For example, if you communicate something very poorly, it might make you look like a bad person, that you're not trying to say something necessarily bad, but that your opinions are not being voiced in a proper way. On a larger scale, they can be disastrous. For example, during a war where two sides are negotiating a treaty, if they do not communicate properly, then they will inevitably be hostile toward each other, and that will lead to a disastrous consequence for many people.
Very, very good. If you had to give an advice to somebody, if you had to be a counselor to a person, to a friend, to a family member, to a peer, to a classmate, eventually maybe to a state government or a company, an enterprise where the communication is not so effective, and you say, well, look, I have experience showing or teaching people how to communicate effectively. What would you tell them? How could they become better communicators? How could they communicate more effectively? What did you tell them, Ardi?
Well, before you say something, Ruth, before you communicate a message, first, I would say think thoroughly about what you're about to communicate, and think about how it could be interpreted by the person you are sending the message to. So you would have to think it through many times. What would happen if this person got the message? Would they understand exactly what I'm trying to say? And if the answer is yes, I'm being very clear about this, then you would send the message, and it would hopefully be a clear message that the other person can then understand when they receive it.
Of course, of course. There are many environments in which communication needs to be very effective. As you mentioned a while ago, in politics, when two governors or two presidents of different nations talk to each other, they need to understand the other person's culture, background, history, likes, dislikes, atmosphere, etc. When two people from different industries or companies communicate, they need to understand the culture of the other company. When two people from the same family communicate, they need to understand thoroughly the way the other person thinks, the way the other person feels. How can we prepare for this communication, for this interchange of ideas when you are not so familiar with the other person? Communication between brothers, between sisters, between spouses, between family members is more or less easy because you more or less know each other very well, right? Or thoroughly, as you mentioned. But what happens when the other person that is changing ideas with you comes from a totally different culture? How do you handle the situation then?
Well, if you don't know much about the person, then when you are about to communicate with them, my advice would be to reserve judgment, to not necessarily make assumptions about them, because you don't know who they are, what their background is, what they are like. So I would say approach with an open mind and try not to pass judgment on everything that they are communicating to you, because maybe their method of communicating is different than the one that you are used to with the people that you know, whereas a person that you don't know may have a completely different background and therefore would have a different way of communicating.
Wow, that sounds really amazing. Well, Ardi, I would like to thank you for your insight, for your comments, for your sincere participation. This is with the purpose of promoting our language center back in Mexico. So I want to thank you for your comments and see you soon. Take care.
Bye. Have a good day.